I think my GF might be cheating on me through her Dungeons and Dragons game. Chapter 1. The boundaries of our separate worlds. Every relationship is a delicate balance of shared spaces and individual freedoms. For nearly 4 years, my girlfriend and I had built what I genuinely believed was an unshakable foundation. We had recently taken the massive step of moving into a 2-bedroom apartment together, transitioning from dating into a shared daily reality. She is funny, wonderful, kind, and honestly, she represents pretty much everything I ever dreamed of finding in a partner. She also happens to be a passionate Dungeons and Dragons enthusiast, a dedicated nerd, as she affectionately calls herself. From the very beginning of our relationship, I never viewed her hobby as a negative thing. In fact, I actively encouraged it. I firmly believe that it is vital for individuals in a committed relationship to maintain their own separate friendships, unique identities, and creative outlets. Over the years, she tried her best to invite me into her fantasy world. She attempted to teach me the intricate rules of D&D, explaining the complex systems of character sheets, modifiers, and the various polyhedral dice. But to be completely honest, I just didn't get it. The sheer volume of abstract rules, numbers, and technicalities felt overwhelming, and I struggled to find the inherent fun in it. Hoping a digital medium might bridge the gap, we attempted to play the video game Baldur's Gate 3 together. We thought a visual, structured video game would make it significantly easier for me to comprehend her passion and experience her world firsthand. Unfortunately, the experiment failed. I found myself getting incredibly bored very quickly. At that point, we both mutually agreed that it was simply better to let her do her own thing. We had plenty of other common interests, activities, and routines that kept us connected, so her having a solitary hobby didn't feel like a threat, and she truly, deeply loved it. Every week, she would get visibly excited for her scheduled online sessions. Afterwards, she would occasionally sit down with me and recount the epic narratives, grand battles, and dramatic arcs her character had experienced. Secondhand, the stories sounded genuinely entertaining, but it remained a world I preferred to view from a comfortable distance. Because we shared a 2-bedroom apartment, we designated the second room as a shared home office where we both kept our laptops. Her D&D games took place entirely online via voice chat platforms and usually occurred in the late evenings. To ensure she had the quiet space required to fully immerse herself without feeling self-conscious, I established a routine of hanging out in the living room or running errands outside the apartment during her sessions. I wanted to give her space and avoid intruding on her fun. Chapter 2. The sound behind the locked door. The harmony of our routine began to shift a few weeks ago when I noticed an unsettling new development. Whenever her game night arrived, she began closing the home office door and turning the deadbolt, locking herself inside. At first, I tried to brush it off, but the action immediately struck me as incredibly strange. Why on earth would anyone feel the need to physically lock a door inside a secure, private apartment, just to play a tabletop board game with friends? The more I tried to rationalize it, the more it weighed on my mind. An uncomfortable knot of anxiety began to form in my stomach, and a persistent sense of unease refused to leave me, driven by a growing sense of desperation and an inability to shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. I made a choice that I now look back on with a heavy heart. I did something that felt pathetic, invasive, and deeply regrettable. But in that specific moment of spiraling anxiety, I genuinely felt like I had no other options. During her next scheduled session, I silently left the living room, tiptoed down the hallway, sat down on the floor directly outside the locked office door, and began to listen. Because she was wearing high-quality headphones, I could only hear her side of the conversation. For the first few sessions, my eavesdropping yielded absolutely nothing suspicious. It was completely mundane. Her reading out the results of her dice rolls, laughing hysterically at inside jokes with her friends, and describing various spells and combat maneuvers. I felt foolish, but the underlying anxiety kept me rooted to that hallway floor week after week. I sat there in silence for 4 straight hours during one session, and over 2 hours during the following week's game. Then the narrative shifted. During the final hour of the latest session, her tone of voice completely changed. The casual, playful cadence of her voice vanished, replaced by an unmistakable, deeply intense romantic energy. It was tender, emotional, and profoundly vulnerable. Through the door, I distinctly heard her say words that pierced straight through me. "You know how deeply I love you, and because of that, I am willing to do absolutely anything to help you save your family." This wasn't a quick, passing joke. The dialogue continued in this incredibly intimate, emotionally charged manner for a solid 15 minutes. She was engaging in a deeply emotional, romantic discussion with another human being. Eventually, her voice shifted back to the regular, chaotic tone of the game. But by that point, the damage to my psyche was already done. My heart was racing, and a wave of intense hurt crashed over me. I quietly retreated to the living room, sitting in the dark, waiting for the session to conclude. The moment the office door unlocked and she walked out into the living room, I confronted her directly. Chapter 3, Reality versus Roleplay. I didn't yell, but the pain in my voice was undeniable. I told her straight out that I had been sitting outside the door and had heard her pouring her heart out, telling another man how much she loved him, and promising that she would do anything for him because he was the only one who truly understood her. She looked at me in absolute shock and immediately defended herself. She insisted that I was taking her words entirely out of context. She explained that it was purely pretend, that she was merely playing a fictional character in a collaborative story, and that none of those emotions were real. But I refused to accept that explanation. I told her that from my perspective, the context didn't change the physical reality of what was happening. This wasn't a scripted video game like Baldur's Gate 3, where a player selects pre-written lines of dialogue to interact with a fictional cluster of pixels. This was her using her own voice, her own creative mind, and her own emotional reservoir to speak sweet, loving, deeply romantic phrases to another living, breathing person on the other end of a microphone. To me, hearing those words delivered with such authentic passion felt like an act of emotional infidelity. She grew defensive, adamantly repeating that it wasn't cheating because her character's identity was entirely separate from her true self. She argued that she introduced the romantic subplot purely for the sake of the narrative drama, believing that having her character emotionally invested in another character made the overall storytelling vastly superior. Then she turned the tables on me. She stated that my decision to sit out in the hallway and spy on her private hobby was a massive, unacceptable violation of her privacy. She argued that my actions proved I possessed a fundamental lack of trust in her, which ironically validated her original instinct to lock the door in the first place to protect her creative safe space. Hearing her words, I felt a deep pang of guilt. I recognized that eavesdropping was a terrible breach of boundaries, and I offered an immediate, sincere apology for spying. However, I maintained that my wrongdoing did not automatically erase or justify the intense emotional pain her actions had caused me. She doubled down, maintaining that she had done absolutely nothing wrong because she was simply participating in the established nature of the game. But that justification only made me feel significantly worse. The core of my distress was something I struggled to put into words. She was the very first person in my adult life with whom I had ever allowed myself to be truly vulnerable. The specific, tender inflection of her voice, the gentle cadence she used when expressing profound affection, the exact traits I thought were reserved exclusively for me and our relationship, were being perfectly replicated and given away to a stranger for the sake of entertainment. It felt like the unique sanctity of our private intimacy was being cheapened and treated as a performance. Was she merely faking those emotions when she was with me? Was she genuinely experiencing real, tangible romantic feelings for this online player? The philosophical boundaries of what constituted cheating didn't matter to me in that moment. The raw, unadulterated hurt did. We argued back and forth for hours, running in circles, unable to bridge the gap between my emotional reality and her technical defense. Eventually, exhausted and emotionally drained, We went to bed in total silence. Chapter 4. The Ultimatums of Limbo. For the next 48 hours, our apartment felt like a battlefield frozen in time. We entered a bizarre, deeply uncomfortable state of limbo. On the surface, we went about our daily routines, going to work, preparing meals, and speaking in polite, superficial pleasantries as if nothing had occurred. But beneath the surface, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The unresolved conflict hung over every interaction. Finally, unable to endure the suffocating atmosphere any longer, I decided to initiate a follow-up conversation. I approached her and explained that we could not continue living in this cold silence. I tried my best to communicate my feelings with greater clarity. I reiterated that I fully supported her hobbies and valued her happiness, but emphasized that, as her committed boyfriend, certain emotional boundaries needed to be respected. I explained that it was psychologically impossible for me to sit comfortably in our living room knowing that just a few yards away, she was actively simulating a romantic relationship with another man behind a locked door. Therefore, I presented a boundary. She could absolutely continue playing her weekly D&D games, but going forward, the home office door had to remain unlocked, and she needed to completely remove any romantic subplots or intimate roleplay from her gameplay. She immediately balked at my request. She pointed out that I had never expressed an ounce of discomfort when she talked at great length about her character's fictional romance with Astarion in Baldur's Gate 3. I forced myself to stay calm and explained the crucial distinction once again. I told her that I had absolutely zero issues with her engaging in romance with a collection of pre-programmed digital pixels, or being profoundly moved by traditional fiction. A video game is a closed loop, but her online D&D game involved a live, interactive dynamic with an actual, real-world human male. That distinction was the entire source of my distress. She grew visibly angry, accusing me of being deeply possessive, insecure, and controlling. She argued that I had no right to dictate how she behaved within her private hobbies or police her creative expression. I acknowledged that while I couldn't force her to change her behavior, she needed to understand that if she lacked the empathy to see how much this situation was actively destroying my emotional well-being, our relationship simply wouldn't have a future. My mention of a potential breakup caused her anger to boil over. She sharply stated that I was clearly too emotional to have a rational, mature discussion. She told me we would revisit the topic only after I had completely calmed down and gained some perspective. With that, she grabbed her bag and left for her university campus to attend her master's degree classes. Left alone in the empty apartment, my mind began to spiral even further. Instead of calming down, the isolation only fueled my frustration. I couldn't understand how my profound hurt could be dismissed so easily, even if she technically believed she wasn't guilty of traditional infidelity. Shouldn't the mere fact that her actions were causing her partner of 4 years immense emotional agony be enough to make her willingly pause and reconsider her behavior? Didn't my feelings hold any weight in this partnership? Or was I truly being an unreasonable, controlling monster? Chapter 5. The Apology and the Unmasking. After reading various perspectives online, I began to realize that while my boundaries regarding the romance were entirely valid, my execution had been deeply flawed. My invasion of her privacy through eavesdropping had compromised my moral standing in the argument. I realized that if I wanted her to truly hear my pain, I needed to approach her from a place of humility rather than accusation. I decided to try a new tactic centered on transparency and compromise. When she finally returned home from her university classes, she was greeted by the scent of fresh, homemade pizza, her absolute favorite meal, which I had painstakingly prepared from scratch as a peace offering. We sat down at the dining table, the air thick with apprehension. Before I could even speak, she took the initiative and demanded a formal apology. She made it clear that regardless of whatever emotional grievances I held, my decision to spy on her and violate her trust was an egregious breach of our relationship's boundaries. I didn't offer any excuses. I looked her in the eyes and apologized immediately and sincerely. I admitted that eavesdropping was an inappropriate, toxic behavior on my part, and that she had every right to be angry about it. My immediate accountability completely diffused her defensive posture. The tension in her shoulders dropped, and she became noticeably more amenable to listening to my perspective. Seizing the moment, I explained as calmly and tactfully as possible that it was deeply distressing for me to watch her simulate romantic, intimate love with a man I didn't know, within a context I couldn't comprehend. I told her that while I was deeply sorry for my actions, I could not simply switch off my feelings, and we needed to find a solution that respected both of our needs. She softened and asked what specific compromise I had in mind. I suggested that trust needed to be a two-way street. I told her that I was entirely willing to trust that her game was purely fictional and carried zero real-world intentions. But in return, I needed her to lift the veil of secrecy. I asked her to keep the office door unlocked and requested permission to sit in on a few of her upcoming online sessions as a silent observer. I solemnly promised that I would remain entirely disruptive-free, that I would never interrupt the flow of their game, and that any discomfort I felt would be kept entirely private until the session ended, allowing us to discuss it maturely afterward. A profound look of relief washed over her face. She confessed that she had been terrified. I was going to issue a harsh ultimatum, demanding she quit the game entirely or face an immediate breakup. She stated that she personally had absolutely no issues with me listening in, but out of respect for her friends, she needed to clear the request with her online group chat first. I agreed completely, viewing her response as incredibly mature and reasonable. However, the peaceful resolution didn't last long. For the rest of the evening, her phone began buzzing incessantly. A relentless stream of Discord notifications poured in, and as the hours ticked by, her expression grew increasingly stressed, anxious, and upset. This digital storm continued late into the night, extending long after I had gone to bed. When I woke up in the middle of the night and asked if everything was all right, she looked visibly shaken. She told me that there was some drama in the group, but begged me not to wait up, promising she would explain the entire situation to me in the morning. Chapter 6. The True Intentions of Joe. The next morning, she sat me down, looking completely exhausted from a lack of sleep. She revealed the chaotic details of what had transpired in the group chat after she made her request. She explained that when she initially proposed the idea of me silently listening to a few sessions to help alleviate my anxiety, the majority of the players were completely fine with it, except for one person. The primary opposition came entirely from Joe, the specific individual whose character was involved in the romantic storyline with my girlfriend's character. The moment my presence was suggested, Joe had an absolute meltdown in the group chat. He aggressively stated that he would feel completely unsafe performing and role-playing if an outside stranger was present in the voice channel. He went so far as to declare that he would refuse to participate in any game where I was present. My girlfriend, trying to salvage the situation, pointed out to Joe that the entire purpose of my presence was specifically to observe their characters' relationship, so I could see firsthand that it was just harmless acting. Joe responded by attacking me, calling me completely unreasonable, and claiming that my girlfriend was violating his personal boundaries by subjecting the group to my controlling demands. While the public group chat explosion was alarming, it was nothing compared to the private direct messages Joe sent to her personal account afterward. She pulled up her phone and showed me the texts. Joe had drafted an incredibly lengthy, emotionally manipulative manifesto. He wrote extensively about how deeply he cared for her, claiming it broke his heart to watch her dim her brilliant creative light simply to appease a controlling, abusive, and insecure boyfriend who was actively stifling her artistic soul. He told her that she deserved to be with a real man who truly appreciated her unique essence, someone who fully shared her deep passions and allowed her to be her authentic self. He explicitly stated that he was readily available to be her emotional support if she needed to talk. The message concluded with a classic, highly predictable paragraph bemoaning how wonderful women always choose selfish, toxic men, while completely ignoring the amazing, sensitive guys who are standing right in front of them. He claimed that the profound connection they shared through their fictional characters was undeniably real, and he begged her not to ignore the chemistry they had built. As I read through the text messages, the initial anger I expected to feel completely dissolved. Instead, I was hit by an overwhelming wave of second-hand embarrassment. The sheer desperation and cliché nature of his words were so intensely cringy that I actually burst out laughing. It felt like reading a textbook script of an internet stereotype come to life. I told my girlfriend that I couldn't even be angry because the message was just profoundly sad. But the revelations didn't stop there. My girlfriend then showed me a private message she had received from Jenny, another female player in the D&D group. Jenny confessed that she had actually found Joe's behavior incredibly creepy for a long time. She noted that Joe seemed far too personally invested in the romantic storyline, and that his intense roleplay segments had been aggressively taking up an annoying amount of the group's limited game time. Jenny explained that she had previously remained silent because she mistakenly assumed my girlfriend was genuinely enjoying the drama. But now that it had caused a real-world problem, she felt compelled to speak up and validate that Joe was completely out of line. Finally, the dungeon master running the game, Mitch, sent a message explaining that Joe had reached out to him privately, demanding that I be barred from the channel to prevent me from violating the sacred intimacy of the group. Joe had even tried to manipulate Mitch into convincing my girlfriend to break up with me entirely. Faced with this absolute explosion of interpersonal drama, the group decided to officially cancel their upcoming session indefinitely to figure out how to proceed. My girlfriend hadn't responded to Joe's massive paragraph yet, but she looked incredibly relieved that I was handling the situation with laughter and calm logic rather than explosive jealousy. I hugged her and explained that I would never be upset about some desperate guy being attracted to her. She is a wonderful, beautiful woman. It is completely natural that people will be drawn to her wherever she goes. My sole concern from the very beginning was whether she was reciprocally invested in him. Seeing Joe's unhinged, unrequited manifesto proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that she was entirely innocent, which completely erased my lingering insecurities. Chapter 7. The Freedom of the Unlocked Door. Unfortunately, Joe did not take being left on red very well. Later that afternoon, as my girlfriend was preparing to draft a formal response, Joe sent one final, explosive text message. Realizing his manipulative nice guy routine had failed completely, he completely shed his sensitive persona. He sent a vicious, insulting message, stating that she was destined to die completely alone with a house full of cats because her asshole boyfriend was inevitably going to abandon her the absolute second she lost her youthful looks. Seeing his true, toxic colors fully unmasked was the easiest closure we could have asked for. My girlfriend didn't even bother replying. She simply blocked his account across all platforms, took detailed screenshots of the entire exchange, and forwarded them directly to Mitch and the rest of the gaming group. Needless to say, Joe was permanently expelled from the D&D group on the spot. My girlfriend turned to me and offered a sincere apology, admitting she felt foolish for failing to recognize just how deeply unstable and manipulative the guy had been during their game sessions. With the crisis resolved, we sat down to establish permanent, healthy boundaries for our home going forward. We mutually agreed on a core golden rule. If an in-game romantic interaction or narrative dynamic ever makes her feel the instinctive need to lock a door or hide it from me, that is the exact signal that the interaction crosses a healthy boundary and shouldn't be happening. She explained that her original habit of locking the door wasn't actually born out of a desire to hide an affair. She had locked her bedroom door at her parents' house for years, simply to find the uninhibited psychological freedom to fully voice act and perform her characters without feeling embarrassed by family members overhearing her sound silly. However, she fully acknowledged how incredibly suspicious that action looked within the context of a cohabiting romantic relationship. Moving forward, The home office door remains wide open. She is actively working on becoming entirely comfortable performing her creative role play, even with my physical presence in the room, or while I'm hanging out nearby. The toxic element has been completely removed from her hobby, and our communication has never been stronger. It wasn't an easy hurdle to clear, but love requires giving your partner the grace to navigate mistakes, unmask the hidden threats to your peace, and step forward together into a shared reality built on absolute transparency. It's crazy how a simple tabletop game can completely unmask someone's true colors in real life. Honestly, I'm just glad the boyfriend trusted his gut and didn't let the controlling label stop him from addressing the situation. If he hadn't spoken up, who knows how far this guy would have tried to push that in-game romance in order to manipulate her in reality. But I want to hear from you guys. Do you think the boyfriend was originally overreacting? Or was his intuition completely spot on from day one? And how would you handle it if your partner started doing intense, romantic role play with someone online? Drop your thoughts in the comment section below. I always love reading your perspectives. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Stay safe and take care.